From calling out a wrestler's wife to stealing their girlfriend, from getting into public fights to holding a grudge for 3 decades, these are WWE wrestlers who hate each other in real life. Kicking off our list with one of the most infamous wrestling rivalries of all time, Bret the Hitman Hart and Goldberg. Their issues trace back to a fateful night at WCW's Starrcade 1999, when Goldberg delivered a stiff kick to Bret's head that gave Bret a severe concussion and would eventually force him into early retirement. Bret has never forgiven Goldberg for the incident, and he's called Goldberg out repeatedly over the years, claiming the former WCW champion was dangerous in the ring and didn't know what he was doing. Goldberg, for his part, has admitted he feels sorry about the incident but maintains it was an accident. The two have never properly reconciled, and Bret still holds a grudge to this day. When Goldberg returned to WWE in 2016, Bret made it crystal clear he wasn't happy about it. Even when Goldberg retired this year, Bret maintained his stance about how unsafe Goldberg was in the ring and that he doesn't deserve to be treated like a legend. Speaking of Goldberg, the Hitman isn't the only Canadian wrestler who hated working with him. The beef between Goldberg and Chris Jericho goes way back to their WCW days, and this one's all about ego and respect, or the lack thereof. Back in WCW during the late 90s, there were plans to put Goldberg and Jericho in a feud together. Jericho was all for it, seeing it as a huge opportunity, but Goldberg didn't want anything to do with it. Goldberg reportedly viewed Jericho as nothing more than a comedy act and a cruiserweight who wasn't on his level. Jericho was understandably pissed off about this disrespect. Fast forward to 2003, and both guys were now in WWE. The backstage tension continued, and things finally boiled over when Goldberg was bad-mouthing Jericho behind his back. Jericho confronted him, and the two got into a backstage brawl. According to most accounts, Jericho got the better of the exchange, which probably didn't help Goldberg's ego. They eventually had to work together that summer, and while they kept it professional in the ring, the animosity was real. These days, they've both moved on, but the mutual respect? Yeah, it's still not there. While Y2J's beef with Goldberg might have cooled down, let's talk about a recent Jericho controversy that had the entire internet buzzing. Chris Jericho and MVP had a years-long beef that stemmed from a political disagreement in 2020. Apparently, things got so bad that MVP knocked out Jericho on his own cruise show. The personal animosity escalated to new heights when Jericho and MVP had an altercation in a hotel lobby when Jericho was talking to Matt Hardy. Jericho avoided the public fight and allegedly called MVP a jobber before he entered the elevator. According to reports, when MVP joined AEW in 2024, he addressed their situation head-on and decided to clear things out with Y2J. The two have reportedly squashed their beef and seem to be on good terms as of today. But with two massive egos in the mix, you never know when this situation might implode backstage during an AEW show. Switching gears, let's talk about one of the biggest personal rivalries in women's wrestling today. The Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair drama is one of the most talked about ongoing beefs in the WWE today. Becky and Charlotte are two of the most popular stars in the women's division, and this one hurts because these two were best friends at one point. But success has a funny way of testing friendships, especially in a business as cutthroat as professional wrestling. The cracks started showing around SummerSlam 2018 when Becky turned heel, and the fans absolutely ate it up. She became the man and reached a level of popularity that very few women in the WWE have tasted. Charlotte didn't handle Becky's rise very well, and signs of jealousy could be seen throughout their interactions, whether it was in the ring, backstage, or during interviews. The situation got worse when WWE added Charlotte to what should have been Becky's WrestleMania moment against Ronda Rousey. Reportedly, Charlotte was in tears backstage, feeling like a third wheel in someone else's story. Becky later revealed that she could tell her friend was upset with her meteoric rise. The friendship never truly recovered. Things got so bad that by October 2021, they had an unscripted, heated title exchange on live TV that reportedly led to a backstage fight. As of late 2023, they started working together again. But whether their real friendship can be salvaged remains to be seen. But while Becky and Charlotte have used the fuel of personal hatred to reach new heights, let's talk about the time when choosing the wrong fight literally cost someone their WWE career. Mr. Kennedy had all the momentum in the world when he first arrived in WWE. The guy had charisma, mic skills, and WWE clearly saw him as a future main eventer. But then injuries started piling up, and more importantly, he got on the wrong side of Randy Orton. During a tag match on Raw, Kennedy dropped Orton harder than expected, and Randy wasn't happy with the incident. Orton immediately complained to WWE management that Kennedy was working unsafe and reckless in the ring. Now here's the thing about Randy Orton. When he doesn't like you and talks to Vince about it, that's pretty much the kiss of death for your WWE career. Orton also got John Cena to support his version of the story, and Kennedy got labeled as unsafe before quickly being released from the company. Kennedy has maintained that it was all blown out of proportion, that it was just one miscommunication in the heat of the moment. But Randy's word carried serious weight backstage, and once he decided Kennedy was a problem, that was it. After this, Kennedy went on to wrestle in TNA, but his wrestling career never recovered from that one bad landing. Speaking of Randy Orton derailing careers, let's talk about the one time the Viper got so pissed at a fellow wrestler that he literally broke character. Randy's beef with Kofi started with a triple threat match between Kofi, Orton, and John Cena on an episode of Raw in 2010. Orton was supposed to finish Kofi with his signature punt kick, but Kofi apparently didn't get into position correctly. Randy had to adjust on the fly and finish the match with an RKO instead, and he was not happy about it. Orton kept calling Kofi stupid after the match, and the Viper's frustration was obvious to everyone. But here's where it gets sketchy. Orton allegedly went to the higher-ups in WWE and complained about Kofi, and suddenly Kofi's push came to a screeching halt. According to reports, Kofi was supposed to win the Money in the Bank ladder match that year at WrestleMania, but after the Orton incident, he was shoved way back down the card. For the next few months, Kofi was barely seen on TV, and even when he wrestled, it was mostly in squash matches against guys like Sheamus and Batista. Randy has admitted he had a big ego during that period of his career, which might explain why he couldn't let one mistake slide. The silver lining was that 9 years later, they wrestled again on SmackDown, and Kofi got a bit of revenge by hitting Randy with a clothesline and calling him stupid right back. As of today, the superstars have squashed their beef and are on good terms with each other. But while Randy and Kofi might have put their differences aside, let's talk about one of the most controversial wrestling beefs of this year. CM Punk and Matt Riddle never actually wrestled each other, but the hatred between them is absolutely real. Riddle has called out Punk multiple times in interviews and called him a coward and phony. However, things took an ugly turn when Riddle claimed that he's heard rumors that Punk's wife, AJ Lee, had hooked up with multiple wrestlers backstage. While neither Punk nor AJ has addressed the comments, it'll be interesting to see how this situation plays out in the coming months. And while we're on the subject of people CM Punk can't stand, let's talk about Ryback. If you ask Punk who his least favorite opponent ever was, Ryback would be at the top of that list, and Punk has been very vocal about why. The two worked together in 2012 during Punk's legendary WWE Championship reign, and according to Punk, it was a nightmare. On Colt Cabana's podcast, Punk buried Ryback's wrestling style and said that working with him took decades off his life. Punk claimed Ryback was reckless, stiff, and sometimes deliberately trying to hurt him. The worst incident involved Ryback kicking Punk in the stomach, which reportedly broke Punk's ribs. And apparently, Ryback never even apologized for it. Ryback, of course, had a different perspective on the story. He fired back on social media, calling Punk's version of events inaccurate and claiming it hurt him professionally. He even took shots at Punk's character and called him as a 90-year-old Karen. The feud has continued through social media jabs and podcast comments, with neither man showing any signs of letting it go. But while Punk and Ryback can't stand each other, at least it's not as bad as this next beef on our list that literally had a wrestler at gunpoint. Alberto Del Rio and Sin Cara's beef was so intense that it allegedly involved a gun at one point, which is when you know things have gone way too far. These two had backstage heat that stretched all the way back to their days in Mexico, before either one ever stepped foot in WWE. Sin Cara, who was a big star in Mexico, had a reputation for showing up late and getting drunk before his matches. During a scheduled match with Del Rio, he showed up way past his stipulated time, and that's what angered Del Rio. Del Rio confronted Sin Cara about this incident, and reportedly, one of Sin Cara's friends pulled out a gun and threatened Del Rio. Years later, when they both ended up on the WWE roster together, that heat didn't cool down. It got worse. They were notoriously stiff with each other during matches, and fans could tell something was off because their matches always looked extra brutal, like they were actually trying to hurt one another. These days, both are out of WWE, which is probably for the best given their history of drama. From guns to fists, let's talk about a heated backstage rivalry between two of SmackDown's biggest stars in 2005. Booker T and Batista decided to settle their differences the old-fashioned way, with a classic locker room brawl that sounds like something out of a movie. The problem started because Batista allegedly let his rapid rise to stardom go straight to his head. After winning the 2005 Royal Rumble and becoming World Heavyweight Champion at WrestleMania 21, Batista was on top of the world. But according to his co-workers, he started acting like he was too good for everyone else. He irritated a lot of people backstage with his attitude, but Booker T wasn't the type to just let it slide. During a photo shoot for SummerSlam, the two started exchanging words. Rather than let it blow up in front of the cameras or complain to Vince, they agreed to handle it like men in a full-on fistfight. According to most accounts, Booker T got the best of Batista in the scrap, which probably humbled the animal a bit. Rey Mysterio apparently tried to break it up, but these guys were determined to settle their beef. Fit Finlay, who witnessed the fight, had a different take and claimed Batista actually won. Thankfully, cooler heads eventually prevailed, and they managed to squash the beef. But for a moment there, SummerSlam 2005 could have ended up being a completely different show. Switching gears from fistfights, let's talk about a catfight between two of the most popular divas in WWE history. The tension between AJ Lee and Nikki Bella started when the Total Divas reality show launched in 2013 with the Bella Twins as main cast members. AJ Lee publicly declared she hated the show and everything it represented. She felt like it was turning women's wrestling into a joke, valuing fame and drama over actual wrestling ability. Then AJ cut one of the most savage promos in women's wrestling history, basically calling out the entire Total Divas cast but especially targeting the Bellas. She also dropped the legendary line about talent not being physically transmitted, which was a brutal dig at the Bellas' relationships with John Cena and Daniel Bryan at the time. But Nikki and Brie didn't take that lying down. They confronted AJ backstage after that promo, and the heat was very real from that point forward. Fans largely sided with AJ, and the rivalry became so personal that you could see the genuine hatred in their interactions even during their segments on Raw. However, in a pleasant twist, when AJ retired in 2015, Nikki actually had kind words for her, which suggests maybe time healed some wounds. 3 years later, Nikki even said she wanted AJ to be part of WWE's first all-women pay-per-view, Evolution, but AJ chose not to participate. With both AJ and Nikki wrestling in the company in 2025, it'd be interesting to see if WWE decides to revisit this rivalry. Speaking of AJ, let's bring it back to CM Punk because the man has enemies everywhere. When CM Punk quit the WWE in 2014, many fans thought we'd never see him back in a wrestling ring. However, when the Second City Saint made his AEW debut in 2021, the wrestling world was turned upside down, and fans were excited to see the former world champion back in the cut. Punk's AEW run saw him feud against the likes of Darby Allin, MJF, and Eddie Kingston. But all of this was overshadowed by his real-life beefs that eventually led to his exit from the company. Punk's first major beef in AEW was against Hangman Page and the Young Bucks, which started when Page said some things about Punk during a promo that rubbed Punk the wrong way. Punk fired back by calling Page an empty-headed cowboy and even got into a real-life backstage brawl with the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega. However, Punk's drama with the AEW locker room was still far from over. During AEW All in 2023, Punk got into a backstage altercation with Jack Perry, and things got so out of hand that Tony Khan had to release Punk from the company. But even after Punk left AEW and came back to WWE, drama kept following him as Punk was greeted by Seth Rollins, who has always despised Punk for walking out in 2014. Luckily, Punk and Rollins have managed to keep things professional and avoided getting into any backstage brawls ever since Punk returned at Survivor Series 2023. Speaking of returns, check out this video next about the most loved versus most hated WWE returns.